myths, treasure, and betrayal, the secrets of the Knights Templar. Hello and welcome back to Driftwood Histories. Tonight, our journey takes us deep into the heart of the Middle Ages, to a time of profound faith and brutal warfare, of soaring cathedrals and dusty, blood-soaked roads. We are exploring the story of a brotherhood that, for 2 centuries, stood as one of the most powerful and enigmatic forces in the Western world. They were monks who were also soldiers, bankers who were also martyrs. They were the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. History knows them simply as the Knights Templar. Their story is a grand and tragic epic. It is a tale of a humble beginning that grew into a global empire, of immense wealth and unwavering piety, of secret rituals and legendary treasures. And it is a story of a sudden, brutal, and unjust fall that has echoed through the centuries, giving birth to some of the most enduring conspiracy theories of all time. So, find your comfortable place. Let the modern world fall away. Close your eyes, and allow my voice to be your guide as we trace the complete history of this legendary order, from their noble founding in Jerusalem to their fiery demise in Paris, and into the shadowy afterlife of myth and legend where they still ride today. Our story begins, as it must, in the Holy Land, with 9 knights and a sacred promise. The year is 1119. The city of Jerusalem, a place holy to 3 great faiths, is under Christian rule. Less than 2 decades have passed since the armies of the First Crusade, a chaotic and brutal wave of European knights and peasants, stormed the city's walls in 1099, reclaiming it from Fatimid control. They established a series of fragile crusader states, a Christian kingdom in a sea of Muslim territories. For the faithful of Europe, this was the fulfillment of a divine promise. The dream of making a pilgrimage to the sacred sites of Christendom, to walk the Via Dolorosa, to pray at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, to touch the very ground where their Savior had lived and died, was now a reality. And so they came, in a great, hopeful tide. They were merchants, nobles, peasants, and priests, traveling thousands of miles by land and sea, driven by a profound and passionate piety. But the reality on the ground was far from the heavenly vision they imagined. The journey from the port city of Jaffa on the coast to the holy city of Jerusalem, a distance of only about 40 miles, was a gauntlet of death. The road was infested with Saracen raiders and common bandits who preyed on the endless stream of unarmed, vulnerable, and often wealthy pilgrims. In the spring of that year, 1119, during the Easter celebrations, a particularly horrific massacre occurred. A group of some 700 Christian pilgrims, traveling from the Jordan River back to Jerusalem, was ambushed. 300 were slaughtered without mercy. Another 60 were taken captive to be sold into slavery. The dream of salvation had, for many, become a nightmare of death and despair. The new kingdom of Jerusalem, it seemed, could conquer cities but could not protect its own flock on the roads. It was in this climate of perilous piety and political instability that a French nobleman from the region of Champagne, a veteran of the First Crusade named Hugues de Payens, sought an audience with Baldwin II, the king of Jerusalem. He was accompanied by 8 other knights, including his relative, the Flemish nobleman Godfrey de Saint-Omer. Their proposal, presented to the king in the heart of the holy city, was radical, unconventional, and, to some, almost heretical. They wished to form a new kind of monastic order. They would take the traditional monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But they would not spend their days in quiet prayer and the contemplation of Scripture. They would wield swords. They would be warrior monks, a brotherhood dedicated to God, but tasked with the worldly, brutal, and desperately needed duty of protecting Christian pilgrims on the treacherous roads of the Holy Land. King Baldwin, a pragmatic ruler desperate for any solution to the chaos that plagued his kingdom, saw the merit in this strange and dedicated proposition. He granted their request, and, in a move of immense symbolic importance, he gave them a headquarters in a wing of his own royal palace, a building located on the Temple Mount. This was a site of staggering holiness and profound mystery. It was revered by Jews as the location of the first and second temples. It was revered by Muslims as the site from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven, the location of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. And it was revered by Christians as the place where Jesus had preached, the site of the ancient Temple of Solomon. It was from this sacred ground that the new order drew its name, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. They became, for short, the Knights of the Temple, or, as history would forever remember them, the Knights Templar. For the first 9 years of their existence, from 1119 to 1128, the Templars were a small, humble, and almost invisible order. There were only the original 9 of them. They had no official uniform, no vast resources, and, remarkably, they accepted no new recruits. They were so poor, according to the great chronicler of the Crusades, William of Tyre, that the 2 founders, Hugues de Payens and Godfrey de Saint-Omer, had to share a single horse. This powerful image, 2 grim-faced, armed knights riding on one steed, would become their official seal, a potent symbol of their initial commitment to poverty and brotherhood. It was an image that would later stand in stark and deeply ironic contrast to the unimaginable wealth they would one day command. During these early years, their duties consisted of patrolling the road from Jaffa to Jerusalem, a small, dedicated band of holy bodyguards. But these were not just 9 ordinary, isolated knights. They were well-connected. Hugues de Payens, in particular, was a shrewd diplomat who understood the art of politics as well as the art of war. He knew that for the order to survive, to grow, and to fulfill its mission, it needed the one thing it lacked: official sanction and support from the ultimate authority in Christendom, the Pope. In late 1127, Hugues de Payens and 5 other knights traveled back to Europe with a mission: to gain this official recognition and, more importantly, to recruit new members and raise funds for their holy cause. His timing was perfect. Europe was still gripped by crusading fever. The idea of a new knighthood, a holy militia dedicated to defending the sacred places, captured the medieval imagination. His most crucial meeting was with his own kinsman, Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard, the Cistercian abbot, was, without exaggeration, the most powerful and influential churchman of the age. He was a spiritual titan, a brilliant theologian, a political kingmaker whose letters could sway kings, and a fiery preacher whose words could launch crusades. He was the moral conscience of Europe. Hugues de Payens' vision of a new kind of warrior, a monk with a sword, captivated Bernard. He saw in the Templars the ideal Christian knight, a figure who could redeem the violent, sinful nature of secular knighthood by dedicating it to the service of God. In January of 1129, at the Council of Troyes in France, Bernard of Clairvaux personally and passionately championed the Templars' cause before the assembled bishops and nobles. He penned a famous and highly influential treatise, De Laude Novi Militiae, in praise of the new knighthood. In this work, he laid out the theological justification for the order, contrasting the pious, selfless Templars with the vain, worldly, and often sinful secular knights of Europe. A Templar, he wrote, is a truly fearless knight and secure on every side, for his soul is protected by the armor of faith, just as his body is protected by the armor of steel. He is thus doubly armed and need fear neither demons nor men. The council, swayed by Bernard's immense authority and eloquence, officially recognized the order as a new, legitimate branch of the Church. They tasked Bernard with writing the Latin Rule, a set of 72 clauses, based on the Cistercian rule, that would define the Templar way of life. It was a strict and demanding code, blending the austerity of monastic life with the rigors of military discipline. They were to eat their meals in silence, to fast regularly, to avoid all contact with women, even their own mothers and sisters, to wear simple clothes, and to forsake all personal property. But they were also to be in a perpetual state of readiness for war, their lives dedicated to the defense of the faith. The Pope later granted them the right to wear a distinctive white mantle over their armor, a symbol of their purity and chastity. In 1147, Pope Eugenius III, a former student of Bernard's, added a simple, stark, red cross to be worn over the heart, a symbol of their willingness to be martyrs for Christ. This became their iconic and fearsome uniform. With the Pope's blessing and Bernard's powerful endorsement, the floodgates opened. The Knights Templar became a European sensation. Donations poured in from every corner of Christendom. Noble families, eager to secure their place in heaven and to contribute to the holy war, gifted the order vast tracts of land, castles, farms, vineyards, and immense sums of money. Younger sons of the aristocracy, who had no inheritance to look forward to under the feudal laws of primogeniture, flocked to join their ranks. To join the Templars was to find a noble purpose, a life of honor and adventure, and a guaranteed path to salvation. Within a few short decades, the Templars were no longer 9 poor knights sharing a horse. They had become a vast international corporation, a multinational army, a spiritual and financial superpower. They established commanderies or local branches in nearly every kingdom of Europe, from Scotland to Spain, from England to Hungary. These commanderies acted as recruitment centers, training grounds, and, most importantly, as profitable agricultural and administrative hubs that funneled a constant stream of wealth and manpower to the east. And, crucially, they were granted a series of papal bulls that gave them extraordinary privileges. They were made exempt from all local laws and all local taxes. They were allowed to have their own priests and build their own chapels. And they were made accountable only, and directly, to the Pope himself. They had become a state within a state, a holy order that stood outside the traditional feudal hierarchy, a new and powerful force in the medieval world. The new knighthood had risen. For the next century and a half, the Knights Templar stood as the elite fighting force of the Crusader armies, the very backbone of the Christian presence in the Holy Land. In an age of often unruly and undisciplined feudal levies, the Templars were a professional, standing army. They were renowned for their iron discipline, their tactical prowess, and, Above all, their fanatical, almost suicidal bravery. Their strategy in battle was based on the devastating, coordinated charge of their heavy cavalry. They would often hold back, a silent, white-clad line in the chaos of battle, waiting for the perfect, decisive moment. Then, under their black and white banner, the busant which bore the motto Non nobis, Domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, they would charge. They moved as a single, unstoppable unit, a human battering ram that would crash into the enemy lines and shatter their formations. To charge with the Templars was to charge with the certainty of either victory or martyrdom. This fearsome reputation was forged in numerous battles. At the Battle of Montgassard in 1177, their legend was cemented. A small crusader army, led by the young, courageous, but physically frail leper King Baldwin IV, found itself facing a massive Saracen army of over 26,000, led by the great Sultan Saladin himself. The Crusaders were outnumbered more than 10 to 1. But with a force of around 500 knights, including a crucial contingent of Templars, they charged into the heart of Saladin's forces. The result was one of the most remarkable and improbable victories of the Crusades. Saladin's army was routed, and he himself barely escaped with his life. The victory was so stunning it was considered a divine miracle, and the reputation of the Templars as God's holy warriors echoed across Christendom. But their influence, and their true revolutionary power, stretched far beyond the battlefields of the Levant. Their vast, interconnected network of commanderies, which stretched from the highlands of Scotland to the ports of Jerusalem, made them uniquely positioned to handle international finance. And in doing so, they inadvertently, and then very deliberately created what was, in essence, the world's first international banking system. The system they pioneered was ingenious and addressed a critical need of the age. A nobleman or a wealthy merchant in London, planning a pilgrimage or a business trip to the Holy Land, faced the immense danger of carrying his wealth-heavy, conspicuous, and theft-prone gold and silver coins across thousands of miles of dangerous territory. The Templars offered a solution. The nobleman could deposit his gold and valuables at the London Temple, their fortified headquarters in England. In return, he would receive a coded letter of credit, a piece of parchment detailing the sum he had deposited, authenticated with a complex cipher. He could then travel with only that lightweight, easily hidden letter. Upon his arrival in the Holy Land, he could present the letter at a Templar preceptory in Jerusalem or Acre. The Templar clerks there, able to decipher the code, would then give him the equivalent sum in local currency. This system made travel immeasurably safer and spurred both pilgrimage and international commerce. It was a medieval version of a traveler's check, backed not by a single bank, but by the full faith and credit of the most powerful military order in the world. From this foundation, their financial activities grew exponentially. They became the trusted bankers to the great and powerful of Europe. They managed the royal treasury of the French monarchy for over a century. They arranged and brokered massive loans to kings, princes, and even the Pope himself. They held the crown jewels of England and France as collateral for these loans. They acted as tax collectors, as estate managers, and as trusted financial advisors. Their commandery in Paris, known simply as the Temple, was not just a church. It was the financial heart of Europe. A massive, heavily fortified complex, it was considered the safest depository on the continent. Kings and nobles stored their personal fortunes within its vaults. The Templars had become, in a very real sense, the central bankers of Christendom. Their wealth became staggering. They owned vast tracts of land in nearly every country in Europe, farms, vineyards, mills, and entire villages, all managed with ruthless efficiency and all generating tax-free income. They had their own fleet of ships, which they used not only for transporting troops and supplies to the east, but also for a highly profitable commercial trade. At one point, through a financial transaction, they owned the entire island of Cyprus. They had become a truly international corporation, a powerful, wealthy, and deeply secretive empire, accountable only to a distant pope in Rome. But with great power comes great envy, and with immense wealth comes an even greater target. By the late 13th century, the political and military climate had shifted dramatically. The crusading spirit in Europe was fading. The crusader states in the Holy Land, which had been the Templars' entire raison d'etre, were crumbling. One by one, the great crusader castles and cities fell to the rising power of the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. In 1291, after a long and brutal siege, the city of Acre, the last Christian stronghold on the mainland, fell. The Templars fought to the last man, their Grand Master at the time, Guillaume de Beaujeu, dying in the desperate, final defense of the city. The surviving Templars, along with the other military orders, were forced to retreat to their fortress on the island of Cyprus. Their original, sacred purpose to protect pilgrims and to defend the Holy Land was now gone. They were a military order with no war to fight. But their immense wealth, their vast network of properties across Europe, and their deeply ingrained culture of secrecy remained. They were a powerful, land-rich, and now seemingly purposeless military organization, and many of the monarchs of Europe, who were deeply in their debt, began to look at them with suspicion and greed. Back in France, a king with an empty treasury and an insatiable ambition was watching. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair for his handsome features, not for his character, was a ruthless, cunning, and fanatically pious monarch. He had already expelled the Jews from France in 1306 to seize their assets. He had debased the kingdom's currency to pay his immense debts, many of which he owed directly to the Knights Templar. Now his eyes fell upon the vast, untaxed wealth of the order. He saw not a holy brotherhood, but a wealthy, arrogant, and dangerously independent organization operating within his kingdom. A bank he could not control and a private army that did not answer to him. He wanted their money, and he would stop at nothing to get it. Working in secret with his chief minister, the equally ruthless lawyer Guillaume de Nogaret, Philip began to weave a web of conspiracy. They secretly spread dark rumors about the order. They found disgruntled or expelled ex-Templars and, through bribery, threats, and coercion, collected testimony from them. They spun wild tales of heresy, blasphemy, and sexual depravity within the order's secret initiation rites. They carefully and methodically built a secret case against the Templars, preparing for a strike of unprecedented scale and precision. The blow fell at dawn on Friday, October 13, 1307. In a perfectly coordinated operation, a feat of logistics and secrecy that was remarkable for its time, Philip's men, the seneschals of France, simultaneously arrested every Knight Templar in the kingdom they could find. Hundreds of knights, from simple serving brothers to the highest-ranking commanders, were dragged from their beds in commanderies across the country and thrown into royal dungeons. The most prized captive was the distinguished, elderly Grand Master of the Order Jacques de Molay, who was arrested at the temple in Paris. The charges, which were unsealed and read out to a stunned and horrified public, were a masterwork of propaganda, a carefully crafted cocktail of the most heinous crimes imaginable in the medieval world. The Templars were accused of heresy, of denying Jesus Christ and spitting, urinating, or trampling on the cross during their secret initiation rites. They were accused of idolatry, of worshipping a strange, bearded demonic head called Baphomet. They were accused of institutionalized sodomy and of performing obscene, ritualistic kisses. And, of course, they were accused of financial corruption and greed. The charges were designed to shock, to horrify, and to completely destroy the public image of the once revered holy warriors. What followed was one of the most infamous and unjust trials in European history. The arrested Templars were handed over to royal inquisitors, who used systematic and horrific torture to extract confessions. The rack, the strappado, the slow burning of feet coated in animal fat knights who had faced down Saracen armies on the battlefield broke under the unimaginable agony. They confessed to everything and anything their torturers demanded. They spoke of secret nocturnal ceremonies, of trampling the crucifix, of obscene kisses, of worshipping a demonic cat. Jacques de Molay himself, a man in his 60s, was tortured relentlessly. He, too, eventually confessed, admitting that the order's initiation rite had involved the denial of Christ. His confession, though certainly false and extracted under extreme duress, was a devastating blow to the order's credibility and was used by Philip as the centerpiece of his case against them. Pope Clement V, a Frenchman who had been elected with Philip's support and had moved the papacy from Rome to the French city of Avignon, was now caught in a political vice. He was initially outraged by Philip's high-handed actions, which were a clear affront to papal authority, as the Templars answered only to him. But the king's pressure was immense. In November of 1307, under the weight of the so-called confessions, the Pope issued the papal bull Pastoralis Preeminentia. It ordered all Christian monarchs throughout Europe to arrest the Templars in their own lands and to seize their assets in the name of the Church. The Inquisition against the Knights Templar was now officially church-sanctioned. The trials dragged on for 7 long years. In some places, like Portugal and parts of Germany, the Templars were found innocent after proper investigation. But in France, the persecution was relentless. In 1310, a group of Templars in Paris attempted to mount a courageous defense, gathering to publicly retract their forced confessions and testify to the order's innocence. Philip's response was swift and brutal. 54 of these knights were immediately declared relapsed heretics and were burned at the stake in a field outside Paris in a single day. The message to the remaining Templars was clear: silence or death. Finally, in 1312, at the Council of Vienne, Pope Clement V, with King Philip's army looming outside the city gates, officially and permanently dissolved the Knights Templar. He did not formally declare them guilty of heresy, the evidence was too tainted by torture, but suppressed the order by administrative decree, for the good of the church, citing the immense scandal it had caused. Their vast properties were to be transferred to their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller, though in reality, King Philip and other monarchs helped themselves to a significant share. The great order that had dominated the medieval world for 2 centuries was wiped from existence in less than 7 years, a victim of its own success, and the greed and ambition of a powerful king. The great order of the Knights Templar was officially no more. By papal decree, it had been dissolved, its vast wealth confiscated, its brothers imprisoned or scattered. But the final, tragic act of this historical drama had yet to be played. It would unfold on a small island in the River Seine, in the very shadow of the magnificent, newly constructed Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. On March 18, 1314, after 7 long years of imprisonment, torture, and humiliation, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and Geoffrey de Charnay, another high-ranking Templar leader, were brought out from their dungeon. They were led to a scaffold erected in front of the cathedral. They were meant to publicly reaffirm their guilt one last time and be sentenced to a life of perpetual imprisonment. But in a final, spectacular act of defiance, both elderly men, weakened by years of torment, found a final reserve of strength. Before the assembled crowd and the king's officials, they proclaimed their and the order's complete and utter innocence. They declared that their only crime, their only sin, was to have betrayed their brothers and their holy order under the agony of torture, to save their own lives. They publicly and loudly renounced their forced confessions. An enraged King Philip IV, who was present, did not wait for the papal legates to deliberate. He had been publicly defied. He ordered that de Molay and de Charnay be burned as relapsed heretics that very evening, on the same small island in the Seine. As the pyre was lit and the flames began to rise around him, it is said that Jacques de Molay, his body being consumed by the fire, shouted a curse, a final, defiant prophecy to the heavens. He summoned his persecutors to join him before a higher court. He called upon Pope Clement V and King Philip the Fair to appear before the judgment seat of God within the year. Whether this is historical truth or a legend embellished after the fact, the curse seemed to hold with chilling accuracy. Pope Clement V, who was already suffering from a terrible illness, died just 1 month later. King Philip the Fair, a strong and healthy man in his mid-40s, died in a hunting accident before the year was out, suffering a stroke after a fall from his horse. And the proud Capetian dynasty, which had ruled France for over 3 centuries, would soon crumble, as all 3 of Philip's sons would die in quick succession without producing a male heir, plunging France into the chaos that would lead to the 100 Years' War. But the story of the Knights Templar doesn't truly end with the smoke and ashes in Paris. It simply goes underground. It fades from the pages of official history into the realm of myth, legend, and enduring mystery. And the most tantalizing of these mysteries is that of the lost Templar treasure. On the eve of the arrests in October 1307, the Templar fleet, a massive armada of ships moored at the port of La Rochelle on the Atlantic coast of France, mysteriously and completely vanished. The king's men arrived to find an empty harbor. The destination of this fleet remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of history. Did these ships carry the bulk of the Templars' immense financial wealth, their gold, their silver, their precious gemstone safety? Or did they carry something even more precious? Their sacred relics, their secret archives containing knowledge that could challenge the church, and perhaps, as legend would have it, the Holy Grail itself. This is where the whispers begin, weaving a tapestry of possibilities that has captivated historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists for 700 years. One of the most popular and romantic theories is that the fleet sailed to Scotland. Scotland, at the time, was a kingdom at war with England, and its king, Robert the Bruce, had been excommunicated by the Pope. This made Scotland a rare safe haven in Europe, outside of direct papal and French control. The story goes that a contingent of refugee Templar knights, having landed in Scotland, fought alongside Robert the Bruce at the decisive Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. Their sudden appearance on the battlefield, a fresh and disciplined force of heavy cavalry charging under their own banners, is said to have been the turning point that secured Scotland's independence from England. In Scotland, the theory continues, the surviving Templars went underground. They integrated their esoteric knowledge, their building secrets, and their ritual traditions into the existing medieval lodges of stonemasons. It was here, in the mysterious Rosslyn Chapel near Edinburgh, with its bizarre and intricate carvings that blend Christian, pagan, and seemingly Masonic symbolism, that the Templar tradition is said to have been preserved. This, according to the theory, is the hidden, secret origin of modern Freemasonry. Another compelling theory points to Portugal. King Dinis I of Portugal refused to persecute the order. He held a proper trial for the Templars in his kingdom and found them innocent of all charges. However, under pressure from the Pope to dissolve the order, he came up with an ingenious solution. In 1319, he simply rebranded them. The Knights Templar in Portugal became the Order of Christ. This new order inherited all of the Templars' assets, their castles, their knowledge of navigation, and their vast maritime traditions. It was the Order of Christ, with the distinctive red, splayed Templar cross still emblazoned on its sails, that would, a century later, finance Portugal's great age of discovery, funding the voyages of legendary explorers like Vasco da Gama and Henry the Navigator. Did Templar wealth and knowledge, preserved in Portugal, help to fuel the discovery of the New World? And then there is the grandest, most profound, and most controversial conspiracy of all. The idea that the Templars, during their long and secretive tenure on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, had unearthed something of world-shattering, paradigm-shifting importance. Not gold or jewels, but a secret treasure of knowledge. Could it have been a collection of sacred relics like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant? Or perhaps, as some have speculated, they found lost Gospels or historical documents detailing the true life of Jesus, a version that contradicted the established doctrines of the Church, perhaps revealing him to be a mortal prophet with a wife, Mary Magdalene, and a sacred bloodline that had survived. This hidden knowledge, this explosive secret, they say, was the true source of the Templars' immense power and influence, and the real, hidden reason they had to be so utterly and ruthlessly destroyed. The historical record, of course, is silent on these matters. But silence, as we know, is where legends are born, and where the seeds of new secret societies are sown. The Knights Templar, the warrior monks who became the bankers of Christendom, haunt our collective imagination not just for what they were, but for what they might have become. They are the first great ghost of secret history, a story of faith, power, betrayal, and a mystery that has never been, and perhaps never can be, laid to rest. Their legacy is a dual one. In the official annals of history, they are a cautionary tale of an order that grew too powerful and was brutally crushed by a greedy king. But in the realm of myth and popular culture, they are something else entirely. They are the eternal guardians of the Grail, the secret founders of the Freemasons, the keepers of a lost and sacred wisdom. They are the ultimate secret society, because their greatest secret was never revealed. It was either destroyed in the flames of Paris, or it is still out there, somewhere waiting to be discovered. And so our complete history of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon draws to its conclusion. We have followed them from their humble, pious origins as 9 knights in a war-torn land, to their spectacular rise as a global superpower, and finally, to their tragic and brutal demise at the hands of a greedy king and a compliant pope. We began our journey in the 12th century with the new knighthood. We saw how Hugues de Payens and his 8 companions, moved by the slaughter of Christian pilgrims, created a radical new order of warrior monks. We witnessed their struggle for recognition, and their ultimate triumph at the Council of Troyes in 1129, thanks to the powerful endorsement of the great Cistercian abbot, Bernard of Clairvaux. We saw how the order, clad in their iconic white mantles and red crosses, grew from just 9 men sharing a horse into the elite fighting force of the Crusades, their discipline and courage legendary on battlefields like Montcassard. Then, our story shifted from the battlefield to the counting house, as we explored their role as the bankers of God. We saw how their vast, international network of commanderies allowed them to pioneer a revolutionary system of international banking, with letters of credit that made travel and commerce safer for all of Christendom. We saw how their headquarters in Paris, the Temple, became the financial heart of Europe, and how their wealth grew to rival that of kingdoms. But we also saw how this immense power and wealth, combined with the loss of their primary mission after the fall of Acre in 1291, made them a target. Finally, we witnessed their dramatic and unjust fall, and the birth of their enduring myth in The Curse and the Conspiracy. We followed the cold, calculated plot of King Philip IV of France, who, on the infamous Friday, October 13, 1307, arrested the Templars en masse. We saw how he used systematic torture to extract false confessions of heresy, idolatry, and the worship of a strange head called Baphomet. We followed the agonizing 7-year trial that culminated in the dissolution of the order by Pope Clement V in 1312. And we stood by the pyre in Paris in 1314, as the last Grand Master Jacques de Molay recanted his confession and, according to legend, issued a curse upon his persecutors that seemed to echo with chilling accuracy. So what, in the end, is the true legacy of the Knights Templar? They were a profound and complex paradox. Monks sworn to poverty who commanded immense wealth, warriors sworn to God who wielded the sword with terrifying efficiency, and a secret society whose public face was one of piety, but whose inner workings and ultimate fate have fueled speculation and legend for 700 years. Their true story is a powerful cautionary tale about the dangerous intersection of faith, wealth, and political power. It shows how a noble cause can, through its own success, become a victim of the very worldly forces it sought to transcend. The Templars became too rich, too powerful, and too independent, and for that they were destroyed. But their legend, the legend of their lost treasure, their vanished fleet, their secret knowledge, and their possible survival in the shadows, has taken on a life of its own, becoming far more powerful and enduring than the historical order itself. This myth has woven them into the very fabric of Western esotericism. Are they the secret founders of the Freemasons, their traditions carried on in the lodges of Scotland? Did they find refuge in Portugal, their spirits sailing with the Order of Christ to discover new worlds? And did they, in their time on the Temple Mount, unearth the ultimate secret, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or proof of a sacred bloodline? These are questions that history cannot definitively answer. And it is in that silence, in that fertile space between fact and folklore, that the Templars have achieved a kind of immortality. They are the ultimate secret society, not because of what we know, but because of what we don't know. Their history is a vast, ruined temple, and in its empty, echoing chambers, our own imagination is free to wander, to question, to seek, and to dream. Thank you for joining me on this voyage with Driftwood Histories. If these stories have stirred your curiosity and soothed your mind, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of fellow travelers. There are many more hidden currents of time, many more secret histories, for us to explore together. Until then, sleep well. May your own quests be filled with discovery, and may your dreams be free from the shadow of the stake. Good night.